Hi, everyone. We'll take a few moments just to let everyone connect. Thanks for joining us this evening. We're really excited about tonight's program with Jarrett and Jack and celebrating the Horn Book and all the wonderful work that they do. Great. I think we'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Waring. I'm the Director of Education at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. Thank you for joining us and our partners at the Horn Book who are celebrating their 100th year, which is incredible, for our program tonight, Cover to Cover with Jarrett J. Krosoczka and Jack Wong. A few updates before we get started. We love to hear from our guests. Feel free to use that chat button, say hi to us, where you're connecting from. And keep an eye on that chat too, because during the program, we'll be sharing additional information there and links. And the Q&A button. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen if you have questions during the program. We are holding time at the end of the program for questions. If there are any technical difficulties, we get cut off. Hopefully it won't happen. We'll try to get back online as soon as possible. And you can use the link shared in your Zoom reminder to reconnect. And we're so pleased tonight's program is being recorded. So if you miss any part or would like to share with a friend, we should have it on the Eric Carle Museum's YouTube page in the next week or two. So now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Elissa Gershowitz, Editor-in-Chief at the Horn Book, who will introduce our two wonderful guests. Hello, Elissa.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Elissa Gershowitz, Editor-in-Chief of the Horn Book, and I am so thrilled to be welcoming you to our first live virtual event of the Horn Book Magazine's 100th anniversary year. The Horn Book was founded in 1924 by Bertha Mahoney Miller in order to blow the horn for fine books for young people. We started as a bookstore in Boston, the bookshop for boys and girls, and there was a bookmobile that traveled all around New England. It was a really interesting history. So we'll be celebrating all year long, and you can find more information on our website, hbook.com. Thank you so much to the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art for hosting this wonderful event, the first in a series, starting with a conversation between two Boston Globe Horn Book Award winners and Horn Book Magazine cover artists. Jack Wong is the author and illustrator of When You Can Swim, which won the 2023 Boston Globe Horn Book Award for Picture Book. And here is beautiful magazine cover. And Jarrett is the author and illustrator of the graphic memoir Sunshine, which won for nonfiction. Along with many other books. You'll get to hear them discuss all things illustration, and then we'll save some time at the end for your questions. Please put them in the chat. You can join the Carle's mailing list to receive news on future programs. That link will also be in the chat. And without further ado, welcome Jack and Jarrett.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. How's it going up there, Jack? How's it going up in Canada?
Oh, it's going great. I think it's actually one of the days where everywhere in the US is colder than we are. Well, I've been hearing all sorts of, even in the west of Canada, it's snowier, but we have this nice little sweet spot where we're not getting too much weather. Speaking of which, we both met at ALA sorry, I'm remembering the wrong thing. I was in ALA in January for Live Learn X, and I got waylaid by a bunch of snow and flight cancellations and all that. But when we did meet in June, it was clear skies in Chicago. When we were both, we just learned that we both gotten the Horn Book Awards this year for our respective books.
Yeah, no, our introduction to one another was a champagne toast with everyone at this classic booth. That's quite a way to meet a new friend.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see you again.
It's good to see you too, Jack. It's good to see you too. So being that this event is celebrating the Eric Carle Museum and the Horn Book Awards 100 years, and the fact that that Jack and I have both created covers, Jack and I thought that we would start by talking about some of our favorite reads as kids, but not telling you the titles, but drawing what we could remember of the covers and
Yeah.
seeing folks in the chat could guess. So I'll go ahead and start. And and once I see some correct guesses.
So tell me, Jarrett, this book would be something that you read as like really young picture book kind of thing, or
This was 3rd grade.
Mhm.
Okay, let me get some.
Oh wow, you're saying this is from memory.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, Jenny has it. The
Oh.
the motorcycle.
You're obliged to still finish the drawing though.
I am so blessed. Yes, and so I'll explain why I love this so much. I don't know exactly why I love this so much, but I did, and it was my favorite book from childhood. And it could be that because I did have a hamster at the time, so it could be that I was really relating and hoping that my hamster would also learn how to ride a motorcycle, which never happened. But of course, most famously, there are 2 versions of the cover. This is okay, the general shape. There's this cover, which if someone could pipe in about exactly when this one was released. This is the original cover, which I bought on eBay. This I did not buy on eBay because this is my childhood copy.
Wow.
Gifted by the PTA, where every student could go in and choose a book at the book fair.
So this is the book. This was the cover that you knew growing up.
This was the cover that I knew. And let's see who who drew the pictures for this one. I think the interior are still by Lois Darling, and there was a great the interiors are still by Louis Darling, and the Carl had an amazing exhibit of Mr. Darling's work a couple of years before the pandemic started.
Yeah. And so what made you seek out the other original cover? I guess that would be a first edition as well.
Yeah, let's see. This is I think just to have.
Yeah.
I had the great opportunity to write a foreword for a reissue of a Henry Huggins book. So I was on eBay looking for some old copies, and he copyright 1965. I don't know what printing or what edition this is. I'm gonna guess that this was the first edition, because this was also from a public library. They must have been weeding their collection. And there she is, the Queen Cleary, right there on the back.
Wow.
What about you, Jack? What something
That's a great choice. Well, the one I'm about to think of, I don't think anybody will guess. Not because we don't have some diehard kidlit fans, but because I chose something that is probably not making it into the canon of children's books through the years. Before I do that, though, I should say that I did love a lot of memorable books. I moved to Canada when I was 6 years old from Hong Kong. So right at the critical juncture of picture books and that early stage, my memories are a bit fuzzy because I also was reading. It was a time when I don't remember having a collection of books in my room, that kind of stuff. So a lot of the books I remember are from grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. Loving the Wayside side. What is it called again? I always mess up the name of the Wayside School. Yeah. Encyclopedia Brown, Cam Jansen, a lot of chapter book series I just love. I sunk my teeth into all of those. So the cover I'm about to pick is not out of disregard for so many different books that I loved, but what I was thinking about, and I have this setup, which is going to make you look at everything upside down also, because I'm not quite as fancy as Jarrett.
Well, folks, everyone just turn your laptop upside down.
Yeah. So I was thinking, when I think about books from my childhood, I was just naming some of those books that I remember reading, but I also remember these random books that somehow, one way or another, either I took them out and were library loans for months and months, or what have you. And they could be the most random thing. I think I shared during the Hornbooks speech ceremony that one of my books that I really remember fondly is a book about the baseball player Edgar Martinez. And I wasn't even particularly into baseball. I just had that book on hand and I read it a whole bunch of times and I keep reading it and reading it. And that became one of the memorable books. And similarly, there were a bunch of books I read that were nonfiction, that were just like maybe on like airplanes or trucks, and those somehow were, you know, very fondly remembered. I remember this book that I'm drawing is one that I read over and over again on my living room rug one time when I was sick with the flu. And I just remember so many details of having this book in my hands. And it just happens to be a random book about Mazda Miatas, the car. And to this day, my favorite car, if anyone asks, is not a Lamborghini or anything fancy. It's a 1993 Mazda Miata because I once read a book about it. And that's the staying power of reading in books when you're a kid. Oh, I got this was from the library, so I actually need the call number for that as well. So there we go.
Nice.
Right.
That's awesome.
And
none of us would have guessed that. We would have been here like that because someone had guessed Richard Scarry, which I thought was a clever.
Yeah. I almost think, I mean, at this point, you're always reconstructing and imagining your memories. I remember the car going around a curve, in your typical, you know, car commercial where the hair is going through their, or wind's in their hair and they're driving around a curve in a mountain. But one of the reasons why that is a memory I like to think about is that, you know, as a children's author, someone who writes for young readers, it obviously matters a lot to me what books I write and the quality and the heart I put into it. And, you know, that's because I want that book to be out there. I want the book to be available so that some kid out there finds it on the bookshelf and can see the heart and the care and the message in the book. But at the same time, like if I'm having a bad day in the studio and I'm like, oh, I can't get this drawing right, or I can't figure out this scene or whatever, I just remember that sometimes you can't control what kids like. And sometimes the book that sticks with them happens to be a nonfiction, like random book about Mazda Miatas. Yes. And that takes the pressure off a little bit.
Well, that's so true. I mean, this is kind of a bit of a tangent on that, is that, you know, some books will do really well and connect with a lot of readers, and some books might get shiny stickers on them, and some books like won't even garner a tweet from the publisher on day of publication. And the book that falls into the latter category for me is this book called Naptastrophe. It's about this little bunny who doesn't want to nap, and like, yeah, like the publisher, like I don't think there was one social media post, and so, you know, in my mind, you get like how many copies were sold. It didn't make it on any list, but I met a family who named their child after the main character in that book, and like, I was like, that's amazing. So like, you're so right, which is like you never know how and where your work is going to go, and how it's going to affect people and how it's going to affect kids. And for me too, and this could dovetail into the next part we're going to talk about too, but another thing that I love to draw and read were the comic strips in the newspaper. So I was all about Garfield and Snoopy, which are like on opposite ends of like quality comics literature. You know, Charlie Brown and Snoopy, Peanuts gets really deep, and Garfield, you know, hates Mondays and loves lasagna. And so that, you know, getting into that kind of literature got me into drawing, and you know, we're celebrating covers, but we're also virtually at the Eric Carle Museum. And so for the audience, we have some artifacts from our lives to connect the dots. So Jack, would you like to go first? Because you're going to share your screen. You have some photos to share with us.
That's right. I'm going to share a little bit. We talked about our childhood and our reading habits at that point, and now a little bit about our artistic development and education. Jarrett has a lot of his stuff on hand, which I'm jealous of, whether it's your schoolwork, that kind of stuff. I'm sharing my screen because a lot of stuff is back home in Vancouver, across the country. So let me see, share screen. Actually, before I share screen, I'm going to show my first thing, which is that I took my first degree in engineering when I came out of high school. My first degree in university was engineering. And between that and what I do now, there was a point when I thought everything I'd done up to that point in my life, graduating from engineering school, was to prepare myself to go to architecture school. So I actually took a trip to Europe and wanted to create a portfolio that was composed of drawings all done kind of in plein air at the sites of famous architectural sites and buildings. And so these are some sketches from that trip. This is Matera in Greece, and there are these monasteries in the hills.
Courtney, could you unpin me so that we could see Jack as big as possible? I really want to see this artwork. Thank you.
Yeah. So these sketches, when I look back at them, I look at them fondly because I remember at the moment when I was sitting on a hill drawing this building, I was like, I'm just not getting this right. This isn't good enough for my portfolio. And just being taken out of the moment. But now I look back at these so fondly. I'm so glad I have this from this 3-month backpacking trip in Europe that I took. And that kind of represented a bright moment in my artistic development, because as much as at that time I would have described it as being fraught and I was struggling to kind of find my voice, it was actually a really kind of heady and exciting time. So I think back at it and just all the things I was interested in, and I was so motivated to go to film fests just to get, watch indie films and get all this different inspiration. And this is a building by Le Corbusier, which is the famous modern French architects. Anyways, a few sideways turns led me to doing fine art instead of architecture. One of those things being that I realized I didn't actually like books after all this preparation to go into architecture school. So I pivoted and did fine art. I'm gonna make this a full screen. And so I moved to Halifax, where I'm living now, to attend NASCAD University, incredible art school, and did my first few years kind of exploring a lot. But what I'm going to show next are some images that I made in my final year. I was doing kind of the undergrad's version of a thesis project. And it gets kind of dark at that point. And it wasn't like literally dark, but I was into things that were quite involved and quite heavy in terms of subject matter. So this was at some point a painting that I made on the left. And at a later point, I decided I want to draw every brush stroke in that painting in charcoal. And I don't know why I did that. Actually, I do, kind of. It's hard to kind of get myself back into that mindset. This was it hanging in the gallery. The drawing is about, I think, 4 or 5 feet. So it was quite a large drawing. And I did that with this piece as well, which is a drawing of the first page of David Copperfield's, Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. And it was a drawing of a book page where I just drew every word, including on the back side of a page, kind of the faint traces of every word. And what I was thinking about by the end of my time at NASCAD at art school was this question of how much can you really communicate through images? And I was really kind of disenchanted or kind of frustrated with the fact that you can't really actually express a lot in one still image. And this was me probing that question, like, what can we really do except just show something on its surface? Whereas a book, you can actually, flip through the pages and get a story. And so it was quite nice that instead of just continuing down this path of beating myself against the head of this question of like, what can pictures really do? I found book illustration, because at the end of the day, you don't have to just use pictures. You can also use pictures in combination with words, whether things that you write yourself or that's written by someone else. And those two mediums combined can kind of, as they say in reading, kind of come off the page. So the final thing I'm going to show is when I first discovered children's illustration. It was actually a chance project that my friend suggested for me. She was writing a story for her niece, and it was a great little story about a girl who is a princess, but also wants to ride a motorcycle. And she can't figure out how to wear a helmet and a crown at the same time. So I'm giving the story away because I'm showing the first picture of the book and then the last one where she's painted a crown on her helmet. But even as I was doing my best impression of a children's illustration, I kept going right back into things that were like really dramatically lit and just full of shadows and light, and so this was still evidently my thing, making things very dramatic. So a few projects later, I did a book that was called The Brightest Night. And these are some images from that book, which, by the way, is I still feel my favorite thing that I've ever done, and it's not published yet. So just saying. These are some of the images from it, along with the text. And so you can see that at the end of the day, I felt comfortable with dramatic light and shadow. From my art school days, I was still using a lot of black and white. I, in fact, didn't really actually know how to use color yet while I was making this. That book with the motorcycle princess was with computer, so I was able to fiddle with colors a little bit. But actually having to draw something on paper, I actually didn't know how to do color yet. And so this book was actually the thing I did immediately before drawing When You Can Swim. So actually when I illustrated When You Can Swim, I'd actually not really done anything in pastel and color before, but I had, kind of the drawing chops, as you can see here. So it kind of is like that moment in, I don't know if it's the 1950s, where the television went from black and white to color. It kind of was switch that flip for me between this project and When You Can Swim. All right. So I forgot to mention that my connection today online isn't the best. So I hope everyone caught what I was saying there. And now I'm super interested to see what, Jarrett, you have to show for this show and tell of ours, this little exhibition.
That, first of all, I mean, I'm going to echo what I heard in the chat. The drawing of the open book was absolutely stunning.
Oh, thank you.
How long did that take you?
That took, I don't know, weeks on and off, that kind of thing. It was kind of like a conceptually heady time, fourth year in school, when you're trying to make like a thesis that's well developed and has like a big underpinning to it. So I actually, for an art auction, a charity auction, I actually created this item, which is someone can bid to have me draw every page of the book.
Wow.
Luckily, I set the minimum bid at like a number that still wouldn't have been enough to cover that amount of labor. But nobody bid on it, and I didn't ruin the rest of my life.
that was how the story was going to end. All right, show and tell time. Show and tell time. Let me activate my overhead shot again. And all right, awesome. And Courtney, would you be able to there we go. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have a few things, and like Jack said, yeah, I have so many things that are right here. First of all, I was a pack rat growing up, And my grandfather also always empowered me to save things. So, once a year he'd give me a storage bin and he'd say, save what's important to you, and then we'll throw the rest away. And so this is the very first book that I ever made, and I was in 3rd grade.
Wow.
We were studying Greek mythology, and we had to write our own Greek myth. So I wrote a story about an owl who challenged Hermes to a flying race, and then the owl cheated and won the race. Of course, Hermes wasn't aware of the cheat at first. Then upon learning there was the cheat, and of course Greek gods do not like to be embarrassed, and they certainly don't like to be cheated, turned the owl into a moon. So we were learning about brainstorming and organizing our ideas. Some funny things here that you are who you are from the very beginning. I had a company, JK Company, using my initials, and put the copyright notice up. And that was not a requirement. And it's a story that's told like I do now, with words and pictures. And what's really interesting when I look back at this is I'm including elements of graphic novels. I'm playing with how the words and pictures come together.
Mm-hmm.
And I even have, for dramatic effect, a double page spread that bleeds to the edge of the paper. And when they had the contest, the owl cheated. Hermes got very mad at the owl and turned him into a moon. Hermes turned that one owl into a moon, and the owl felt very sad when he saw the other owls flying. About the author. Jarrett lives in Worcester, Massachusetts. He goes to Gates Lane School. He liked making this book. Now, another thing, I was lucky enough that I took a lot of art classes. We had an art museum in town, and the public arts funding just absolutely, it's destroyed arts in public schools. So I went from having art once a week to once a month to not at all. And if you've read Hey Kiddo, you're aware of what this is. This is one of those zine comics that we made in comics class. We had to come up with a theme, and then we all had to make little mini comics around that theme. So this is one of them that I did. And so that's my little person here. And so this was sold at the local comic book store.
Wow.
Which was just so empowering. So everyone had their own little mini comic. And then mine was, at the time, as a teenager, I was making very dark and violent comics, like a lot of gore and a lot of violence. And when I look back at this, it's really interesting to see how, at 15, I was playing around with the panels. And that's in large part because Mark, our teacher, he would bring in for us comics that we never would have picked up on our own.
Mm-hmm.
Art Spiegelman, Harvey Pekar. He wanted to make sure that we were going beyond superheroes and not just looking at superhero comics. And that was very eye-opening for me. Like, I don't think I would have ultimately done a book like Hey Kiddo if not for that encouragement. But something with this, like we had to get art done. Oh, there's my self-portrait. I forgot that was there. I forgot I had a little self-portrait there.
By the way, Jarrett, what was your page count compared to your other counterparts sharing the zine?
I was always an overachiever, Jack. And so, like.
Actually, no, I see there's a respectable page count for some of the other artists as well. Okay.
Yeah. I was always, so actually that leads me to, I can tell you a quick story. So freshman year, 9th grade, there was a contest in the local newspaper to do editorial cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when the art teacher announced that there was going to be this contest. Of course, the winners would be published in the newspaper. They had a section for students for the special issue, and I was like, oh, I really want that. I really want that. And so I submitted 4 comics. Obviously everyone's had to do one, and I'll never forget this classmate of mine. She went up behind me and went, brown noser. I can still hear her saying that, and I was like, I'm not trying to impress the art teacher. Like, I want this.
Yeah.
And I end up getting that was like one of my first things to get published.
Oh yeah.
It's here somewhere, but I don't have it handy. But if you've read Hey Kiddo, you know the comic. Okay, so then I just grabbed from my flat files very quickly. So little kid, like elementary school, high school, and I thought I'd grab these, which are the original sketches from the very first Lunch Lady book.
Oh, what a treat.
My career started as a picture book author. So I cut my teeth with books like Goodnight Monkey Boy and Punk Farm. And I had this idea, this concept for this Lunch Lady story, and it just didn't quit and it didn't go away. And it soon became apparent it couldn't be a picture book. It needed to be longer. But this was back in 2006 when comics, graphic novels for kids were not a thing yet. And so when I submitted this, none of the big houses were publishing comics. But I figured, why not give it a try? My editor loved it, but they had never published a graphic novel before, right? So they weren't quite sure how to deal with this. And they had success with they were working on the Baby Mouse series, in which the books were limited color. Let's see, let me grab the book. Actually, the only copy that I happen to have quickly on hand is the Korean version. So let's see, let me find that particular page. There we go. So the publisher printed it in limited color initially because they just didn't think they didn't want to put a lot of money in the production to have it cost more on the retail level. And so I did 10 Lunch Lady books, and then ultimately took a break because I wanted to do Hey Kiddo and I was doing some other stuff. But now we're revisiting that original run of Lunch Lady, and they're now in full color because the market has changed significantly since the mid to late 2000s. And I'm also writing new Lunch Lady adventures as well. And they're also so the original trim size was this. Here they come up. But as you can see, it's taller, it's twice the size, it's paper over board. And let me get a piece of original Lunch Lady art right here as well. I create my art to be twice the size of what it's going to be printed at. And I'll take you right in there, and you could see if you look closely, the sketching. I use a special when I'm making my comics. I use non-photo blue. It's a special shade of blue. It's not any old blue pencil, but it's non-photo blue. And when I scan this into black and white, the computer doesn't pick up the pencil marks. It just picks up that crisp black ink work. So it saves me the time of going through and erasing all of the graphite. And the big difference now between working then and now is I no longer draw the word balloons on the actual printed paper. Digital technology has changed in such a way over the years that I draw the word balloons on the computer, but I can match the line quality in the physical art because depending on how much pressure you apply to a brush on physical paper, it's going to make that line fluctuate from thick to thin. And now you can do that with digital technology as well.
Yeah, and that must have been, if not a game changer, at least something that was really welcomed.
Especially because I travel a lot too, visiting schools, and I'm just now getting back to that with the COVID of it all waning, and a huge game changer when it comes to being productive when I'm on the go, for sure.
Right. Yeah. That would be a really good way to do something that isn't highly demanding as a drafts person, but still, you need to go through all those pages and do that. Yeah.
It's a lot of work for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Jarrett. The first thing that comes to mind was seeing your comic as it was grade 3 that you did the Hermes and the Owl, right?
Yeah, that was grade 3, and then the other one would have been sophomore, so 10th grade.
Yeah. It's kind of like seeing a prodigy at work, you know. And it's I often feel that kind of pang of envy, but also, you know, just it's thrilling to see young creators work, because as I was talking about, you know, my educational path took a few years into architecture, and then sorry, engineering and architecture. So I had an early love of drawing and art, but it was quickly kind of put aside to go into engineering school and what have you. So when I decided to pick it back up, there was quite this feeling of, you know, even if I feel like I'm an okay drawer, I'm already 20 years behind someone who can just do it with their eyes closed. So it's
Well, there's also one's own anxiety, right? Like there's a direct chart of like aging and you know, being more inhibited when you come to making art. Like we spend all this time trying to be perfect draftspeople and studying art and honing our craft. But then when you look at the art that you made as a kid, like it was all right there all along. Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to try to unlearn some rigidness that you might have gotten in a few places.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it was so amazing to see that work at every stage that you showed. Yeah, so the one more thing that we thought we'd share with everyone here was that, as this event has one of the commonalities between us is that we both did a cover for Hornbook magazine. We thought we'd talk a little bit behind our covers, how we came up with it, what was the thought process. And one of the questions that I'd like to ask Jarrett while that's all going on is, you know, I don't know if everyone is following Jarrett on Instagram, but he does such a range of different things. Over Christmas time, he was doing paintings of stuffed animals. Those are, I mean, it's just beautiful paintings. And then earlier on, he was doing a drawing of a seagull a day. I don't know how long you stuck with that for, but I caught the first few, and they were just such fun experiments. Speaking of kind of unlearning some things, so that you can get back to this kind of play and fun and pet portraits, I'm going to say. So it's evident that both you and I have such a range of interests and styles of working, besides just the one that someone might see by picking up our book. So I'm also curious whether any of that went through your head when you got the Hornbook cover commission. You'd be like, oh, it could be in the style of the book, you know, Hey Kiddo, or whatever you were working on then, or it could be something completely different.
Yeah, a little bit. So here's the physical. 1 second. Spam. Here's the physical book. And yeah, you know, you're right. Like I did think let's try something different here. I'll go ahead and share my screen because I worked fully digitally for this one, but wanted to really make it not feel digital, right? So I did here, let me get rid of the crop marks there, and I'll come in and you can see I used on my iPad a digital pencil to create the line work. And so, you know, it's a little bit line work that's reminiscent to Hey Kiddo. But then I brought it into Photoshop, and I don't have it here, but it's called the Surface Studio, and it's a screen that's this big, and it's like a giant iPad, and it could go, you know, vertical, it could go down to horizontal. And so I wanted to celebrate comics. And let's see, you can throw it in the chat. I'll just slowly scroll through, and in the chat you could give a shout out to any of the comics that you see. But I wanted to give a shout out to, you know, all of these different comics that led to the landscape of graphic novels in libraries that we have now. And at this particular point too, we had just adapted Hey Kiddo to be an audiobook, which could be a whole other hour conversation. But in reference to Hey Kiddo, like that is the Hey Kiddo wallpaper And this is a character that I've been noodling around with for some years, and perhaps the character will make it into something. But everything's on a different layer. So remove things here and there. You can get rid of some of the words. It's very important when you're working digitally to keep things on separate layers, but also, as you can see, to to label them so that you're not searching. So there's the ink work. Here are the highlights, some of the underline work, highlights, shadows, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it was a lot of fun to do. The one, Jack and I were talking earlier in the week, and my experience was so different because this was published in May of 2020. And so when I was, commissioned to create the artwork, I had these visions of being at ALA and everyone being able to, and seeing everyone holding this copy of the Horn book. But of course that didn't happen because COVID reared its ugly head just as I was, pressing send to the art director at the Horn book. But your experience will be totally different, Jack, because it's like we're bookends of where we are at the pandemic, because things are so much more open now. I'd love to hear about. So I assume also your Horn book cover was connected to winning the award, I would assume.
Yeah, it was a commission as a result of being the picture book category winner this year. Before I get into that though, and you're right, it does have all these weird and interesting resonances with where the time that we're living in right now. But I gotta ask about the gatefold cover. Was it your idea or the publisher's? And if it was the publisher's idea, was it just more work for you?
Jack, did you not get a gatefold? Did they give you a gatefold? You know what? Pre-pandemic budgets.
Okay.
Is what pre-pandemic budgets is what this was.
Yeah. But in your case, it must have been very welcome because it gave you that real estate to showcase.
It made that real estate. It was a nice little surprise. Yeah, exactly.
Whereas for me, I was very happy to just have my modest 6 by 9 inches because I didn't want to do any more work beyond that.
That's funny.
Yeah, so this is my cover. And Jarrett, you're right. So I heard about the commission at the same time I heard about the Horn Book Award. So those things are, in my understanding, related. And so there were two things that were big questions. One of them being that when I heard that, I was going to do the Horn Book cover, and that it had something to do with the fact that When You Can Swim was so well received, I figured I was going to do something related to When You Can Swim. And I also figured that I was going to be given like a spring cover, like a July, August. So it'd be a nice, celebration of swimming. I also was aware that it was the centennial year and that it would be kind of a celebratory thing. So some ideas were starting to swim in my head about something that was splashy and celebratory. And then a couple months later, I realized that what I was doing was the January, February cover. And all those ideas about, diving into water and sunshine and bathing suits kind of, got thrown in for a loop. And I was like, I can't do that, in the dead of winter, can I? And so that was the first challenge, was being like, I can kind of ignore what season this issue is and just do swimming stuff anyway. Or I felt much more compelled to respond to the fact that it's the new year, it's winter, it's all those things. So that was the first question I was grappling with. The second one was that given that it's the centennial year, one of the issues, and the first one in the 100th year, I kind of got in my head that I had been asked implicitly to do something that was like with lots of fanfare and celebration and like 100 animals marching down with like an elephant holding a trumpet and something very celebratory. And I think absolutely Horn Book 100 years would deserve something like that. And so I was thinking, for example, if I was thinking about all the people who have gone in through the doors of Horn Book's offices and have worked on the magazine and all the people who've been involved and all the authors, I start thinking about something big and celebratory and like a party on this page, on this cover. But when I think about the other side of it, which is that it's such an individual experience, whether to read this magazine, to have it arrive in your mail and read it, or all the books I was talking about, to read any one of those books and have it be such an individual, personal experience. That's the whole other side of things we're trying to represent, is celebrating reading, celebrating all the personal experiences we've had with this magazine and with books for children and youth. So I was kind of torn between those two. And to be honest, drawing 2 characters is just a lot easier than drawing 100. So I went with that. But honestly, it was also, I was thinking about this imagery because it is kind of this moment. What it depicts is finding the first crocuses after winter and poking out through the snow. And that's an act that requires paying attention to your surroundings, being present, being aware, and then being able to pull yourself into a tiny moment. And for me, reading is kind of like that. Reading is sometimes described as this world expanding experience. You often have this image of someone's reading a book, but there's a thinking bubble, and what they're thinking of is this expansive world. But at the same time, reading is very much a kind of a tunnel vision experience. It requires you to be devoted to just one very small thing, this little book in your hand. And it's different than, even with your phone. With a phone, if you're on social media or online, you can be scrolling through a web page for 2 minutes and decide you want to see something else, and then something else, and something else. So that's not quite the same as just deciding to spend the time that you have with this one thing. So I kind of felt that this image was representative of discovery, and also that in the coming 100 years, one of the things that I feel is really important is for all of us to be able to have moments of just focusing on one thing that's in front of us. And that's what books provide, is just that it allows us to have the faculty to have our undivided attention towards something that's magical and see what happens. And lastly, these 2 characters on this book are actually featured in my upcoming children's book called All That Grows, coming out with Groundwood Books in March. And this book actually starts with an image of a boy looking at crocuses growing outside his window. And then in the title page is a picture of snow and crocuses. So this scene kind of falls somewhere either before or in between those scenes. It's extending the universe of my book, which I really thought was interesting. I really like the opportunity of doing that. So this is part of the All That Grows universe, cinematic universe.
The Jackverse.
Yeah.
That's beautifully stated. I was thinking, Jack, what we should do, we both held up our covers, but not at the same time.
Okay.
So everyone could either take a photo or a screenshot. Ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Okay, they had their chance. Elissa, I think you're gonna. Did anyone ask any questions in the Q&A?
We do have some questions. One is from my mom, so I won't start with that one. One question is, how do you decide whether to work traditionally or digitally? Do you think you'll ever create a picture book completely digitally, born digital?
Matastrophe is fully digital. Where did it go? Did I put it away? Yeah, this is actually fully digital. When I do digital stuff, though, I'm applying all of the techniques that I learned from working traditionally. So I'm choosing a brush that's a digital brush that's like watercolor or Conte crayon, and actually I take that back. These drawings were physical drawings, but it was digitally painted. Digital is just another tool. So would I ever do all digital. I mean, maybe, I don't know. We'll see, depending on the book. What about you, Jack?
Yeah, well, for one thing, I'm also using a lot of digital, and a lot of it is at this point enhancing physical medium. So if I'm doing a pastel drawing, it's kind of like that AI digital age where like don't believe everything you see, because my pastel drawings have so much little digital touch-ups and stuff like that. And you know, at the best of times, it's not just correcting mistakes and trying to hide imperfections, that kind of thing. But you know, sometimes what I like to do is draw with pastel on a piece of paper. You know, that happens to be what I'm using. And traditional artists or artists working traditional medium always have this thing where they don't know when a drawing is finished. And they don't know when to stop. They don't know whether that next mark they make is going to make or break the painting. And one of the game changers for me in working digitally, and especially with the advent of, you know, consumer grade scanners that you can use from home, and that's how you deliver work instead of like sending it to New York to have them photographed, is that I can just scan the drawing at this state and then continue drawing on top of it. And if I happen to ruin it, then at least I like captured it when it was still, you know, usable. And at other times, it'll continue to get develop and change. And when I go into Photoshop, I can kind of combine the best elements of different times of my drawing. So I'm kind of time traveling through different stages of the drawing. So it definitely is a tool for me as well. In terms of whether I do it fully digitally, I definitely think there's a possibility of that, but I would miss actually, that's probably not how it was stated. I was going to state I would miss the hand-drawn kind of working with my hands element. Actually, it's the reverse that's true, which is I just can't stand sitting in front of the computer for that long every day staring at the screen. So I would want something to change it up, even if it's just instead of clicking paint bucket, you get a red, I would paint a sheet of red paper, scan it in, and then, you know, make that into a layer. And that would just be one way that I'm not constantly staring at the screen.
Working digitally doesn't offer me the same meditative centeredness that I get when I'm making physical.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have to ask you the hornbook question. Can you talk about the magic of the page turn? Are you thinking of the page turn as you're both creating? Please talk about the page turn.
Yeah, that is I think the most underrated art in visual literature is when you set the reader up on and then you turn the page to reveal what's going to happen next. Because I cut my teeth on picture books, I brought that into my graphic novels, and it's just the page turn is essential. And in comics, I call it the hand on the doorknob moment, where the bottom right hand panel, the last panel, you know, if the character is approaching a door, don't have them open the door there to see what's on the other side. You know, have a little bit of suspense when you have the reader have to turn the page for that.
Yeah, perfectly said, Jarrett. I'm curious, you were saying that you brought some page turn as you know, your experience with it from picture books into graphic novels. But graphic novels would have had that convention as well, as you were just saying, with comics. Or do you feel like if you hadn't been a picture book author, illustrated before, you wouldn't have thought about it as thoroughly when you got
I don't think I would have thought about it as thoroughly. Because with picture books, you're having, you know, you only have 32 pages, 40 if it's self-ended. And so with that economy of page count, you really have to make the best of with what you have. And that's you know, I wasn't aware of the page turn in comics as much beforehand, you know, because growing up, the comics I was reading were you know, comic books, which sometimes the page count was all messed up because then there'd be like a Kool-Aid ad for one page, right? So
yeah. Well, I think Jarrett has really just said everything that needs to be said about the page turn. I agree completely that I think about it as one of, I mean, if I could kind of add my sentiments, it's that it is one of the key things I think about, because before you get to illustrating everything in beautiful colors and painting and using pastels or any of that, the first step is always doing your thumbnails or dummying. And that's when you hash out what's going to be on each page and what are the words going to be on each page. And when do you move that, when do you go to the next page? So it is one of the first, during the thumbnail stage, it is the main thing I'm thinking about is what things belong on this page and what belongs on the next page and what belongs seen together. That's another way of saying the doorknob thing is, and what belongs seen apart. Because if you take in something, it's like with Instagram being a popular medium for humor comics now, you can have like a 4-panel comic be 4 separate things that you have to see swipe one by one. And now that that's available, it's so much more funny when the jokes land that you see one at a time, rather than a traditional comic strip where your eyes can dart to the very end and you already see the punchline. So that's the same thing of like, what do you want the reader to be able to see all at once, and what do they have to take, a 1 and a 2 to find out.
There are many, many good questions still in the chat. Sorry, Mom. I'll ask them later. But thank you so much. We've run out of time, unfortunately. This has just been so wonderful. Thank you for sharing your process. Thank you for showing us your art, and just being so generous with your books, your stories, your time. This has just been wonderful. And thank you again to the Carl Museum. This has just been great.
Before we go though, I do want to acknowledge that there's a book club here called
Wonderful question.
Yeah.
and there's a question that came in from the book club is that what do you say to kids who are interested in drawing or writing? And I just want to make a connection to what Jack and I were talking about earlier, which was we were living our lives, and there's a passion that we were both drawn towards, and it's all connected to, if you want, it's all connected to the books that we were reading and the sketches that we were making as kids. So for now, don't get caught up in, oh, I want to get published. You have so much to learn, and you learn by doing. You learn by, don't make something thinking like, I'm going to make the best thing, right? That thing you've learned, you've enjoyed the process. And then the next thing you'll make is just a little bit better because you have that knowledge of having made that thing. And then when you make the next thing after that, like, well, now you have the knowledge of having made that thing and that thing. And then when you get to be, old like us, then you have a whole bunch of things that you made that informs what you make next. So just make things, I would say.
Shout out to the Page Turners Book Club, because they're all watching tonight. We just learned that in the chat. Hi, Page Turners. Thanks for joining.
Hello, Page Turners.
Well, thank you for putting this together, everyone. Appreciate it.
That's great. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Great to
Thank
see
you,
you.
Jarrett. Thank you, Jet.
Bye, everyone.